Hey everyone, Mr. MC here. This is a bit of a guide, a tuning guide for the Nurburgring Nordschleife lap time challenge that just popped up for Gran Turismo 7. And I'm going to do things a little differently. I'm going to show the event details, and then we'll go over to what I did in GT Auto, show the tune, and then a little bit of a showcase with the tune. So this is a tweak event ending at the end of January 4th, 2023. And this is with the 2002 Honda NSX Type R. This is a tuning lap time challenge, and here are the restrictions highlighted in the screen right now. So your car needs to weigh at least 1,050 kilograms or more, and do be aware that your car needs to stay naturally aspirated, so it cannot have a turbo, and your engine swapped NSX is not going to work here. In terms of GT Auto, make sure you give this car a wide body, as it'll give you more downforce values to play around with. In terms of the wheels, make sure you give it the wide offset, wide rim width, and change its size from the default size. For the front bumper, A or B works. They both function the same. Same goes with the side skirt, A or B, whichever one you prefer. In terms of the rear bumper, make sure you give it the diffuser, so type A rear bumper. Same goes for the wing, make sure you give it the type A replacement. And make sure you put on a roll cage, so this is under the racing items category. In terms of the tune, here's the tune, so feel free to take screenshots if you need to. And oh boy, this car is a handful to drive. You can actually watch the live stream where I try to tune this car, and it's a bit of a handful to drive because this car loves to spin out whenever you give it the chance to. So my main goal of this tune was to try to make it a bit more predictable to drive, a bit more stable to drive. It's still going to have its moments, so you do need to be a bit careful about how you drive this car, but it should be a bit more drivable now with this tune. So if you're looking for something that will at least help you try to finish a lap at the Nordschleife, then try this tune out, and hopefully it works out for you. And here are the transmission setup. So move the auto set top speed to 310 kilometers per hour, and then adjust the gearbox values. And here's a showcase of a lap with this build. I'm not going to do a lap guide because, well, one is a Nordschleife. It'll take about 10 years to get a lap guide done. And two, honestly, I'm not too happy with my lap time because I know I could go faster, but unfortunately I ran out of time. But when you're driving this car, you have to be really careful with your throttle input. If you give this car any single reason to get just enough wheel spin to spinning out, it will do that. It will take advantage of you. So when you're accelerating out of turns, you have to be really careful about how much throttle input you're putting in. And again, just take your time. Going up to a higher gear can help as well. And actually on some turns over here in this first sector, you do see me taking advantage of that. So for example, right here, I go on third gear, and then I can be just a little bit more aggressive on the throttle. And do be aware that this car does have some downforce, so you can carry quite a bit of speed through some of these higher speed turns. So for example, the fluke plots right here, just carrying as much speed as possible, going around 130 miles per hour. It is possible to go even faster if you nail down that turn. And do be aware that you want to shift when the shift bar is at around 75% full. So where the red box is at, that's where you shift. And you want to brake a little early with this car because the way that I built the car, try to make it a bit more, well, drivable than what it was before, and that ended up introducing some understeer, and the braking distance feels a little bit longer. It also doesn't help that the front ballast is kind of making the car a bit understeery as well. You do have to be a little brave through some of these turns if you're trying to squeeze out as much time as possible, so you will be sliding around a bit. You do kind of need to give yourself a little bit of time to get used to the car and your tune, whether it's my tune or someone else's tune that you're using. You do want to try to figure out how the car drives with that tune and try to see where you can squeeze out all that time. And through here, you can go up to third gear and exit on third gear, and Again, you just have to be nice and careful with your throttle inputs because it's really easy to get impatient on the throttle and then end up spinning out. Do be a little careful right here because there are some bumps that can really unsettle the car. And I did try to adjust the suspension settings to try to make that not as apparent, and it somewhat worked. And one thing I do want to mention is that with the LSD settings, so the differential settings, I had to bring the numbers up quite a bit because there were some parts where the car became horribly oversteery. It became really oversteery if I had one of the numbers too low. I think it was the initial torque. If I had it too low, then the car became really oversteery, having lots of liftoff oversteer. And if I brought the braking sensitivity down, then the car became horribly unstable, especially towards the end of the lap. So the final hard braking zone, the car became really unstable to the point where I couldn't even control it. So I had to bring those numbers up quite a bit just to try to make this car drivable. The front ballast also helps a bit, but as I mentioned earlier, it did introduce a bit of understeer, so you do need to brake a little bit early to try to make sure that you can get the car around the corner. This part right here is not the easiest part to nail down because you have to use around 50% braking power and just try to gently turn on in. Really easy to slide on out and end up in the grass, so you do have to be careful right there. Braking nice and early for this hairpin, and for the carousel you need to brake nice and early, so when you're passing the happy little tree on the left, that's where you start to brake. If you start to brake past it, you're probably going to get spit out by the carousel, and you can be a little aggressive on the throttle right there. And this is probably one of the scarier parts. Well, this whole section is actually pretty scary because you're trying to be really careful with your throttle input, and while the build does try to make the car nice and stable through most of the track, this part is where it's really easy for the car to become unstable because of all the bumps, the winding turns. So there's a lot of things going on, and you just want to try to be really careful about your throttle input, your steering input, braking input, just to try to make sure that the car doesn't start to act up on you. And just taking your time through these turns. I stay on third gear through most of these turns, but I do shift down to second gear a couple of times. So right here, second gear for a bit more rotation, then back up to third gear. This left turn right here, I actually stay on second gear to get a bit more power, but I do need to be careful on the throttle. Brake nice and early for this next right turn because there is a jump just before it. So right here is the jump. Be really careful on the throttle because this is where you can easily lose control with all the bumps. There's actually another jump right here. Lift off of the throttle to make sure that the car stays nice and stable as you make your way through this section of the track. Be careful about hitting the curves because if you hit the curves too hard, the car will not like that at all, and you're probably going to end up in the barrier. Nice and careful with your throttle input once again. And mini carousel, again, careful on the throttle, and if you're careful enough, then it shouldn't be much of a problem to deal with. And through this part, getting ready for the long back straight, just trying to maximize your speed. So you will want to be on fourth gear as you enter the back straight, and again shifting when the bar is at around 75% of the way full, so where the red box usually hangs out at, and just trying to go as fast as you can, so trying to get a really good exit out of the previous turn. And here you can take a little bit of a breather because the next section is probably one of the more difficult parts because it's really easy to mess it up and end up in the wall. And the way that I have the differential tune, it's possible to brake before the curb on the right ends and be aggressive on the brakes. So the car should stay nice and stable and you can brake rather late. But still, you do want to be a little careful to make sure that you retain full control of the car. Just nice and careful through the final section of the track. And there we go. So with this tune, I was able to get a 655.3. which is a bit of a surprise because I was recording this late at night. I know someone who has tried this tune as well. They have a 651, so it is possible to be even faster. But yeah, this one, it's been a huge pain in the butt, if I'm going to be honest with you. But hopefully this tune helps you out a bit, whether you plan on sticking with this tune or building up upon it. Hopefully it helps you out. But that's going to be all for me. Thank you for the support. This is Mr. MCA. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.